Today I'm going to show you how to fit this Malossi Multivar Variator to an Aprilia SR50R. So here's our scooter here. It's just a current model Aprilia SR50R Carb. The first thing we need to do is to remove the standard Variator. The first thing we're going to do is remove some of the plastics, including this screw here for the belly pan, so we can actually access the clutch cover there and get clear access in here. And then we're going to remove the airbox, which is removed via these two bolts just here, just with a hex key. You're also going to need to remove the floor mat like this and undo a few of these screws so you can actually release the belly pan just enough to be able to lift it clear of this bolt just here. Right, so now that we've done that, we can remove the actual clutch cover itself, which is just done by removing the series of bolts along the edge of the clutch cover, including along here, underneath these bolts with the clamps that hold on the brake line, all the way around. Right, now that we've removed all these bolts, we can actually remove the clutch cover so we can get to the Variator. These can sometimes be a little bit tight. I found the best method for doing this is just by using the kickstart, just to jimmy it off a little bit. And sometimes if needed, if they're really tight, particularly when they're new, you can get a flat blade screwdriver and very carefully around the bolt coupling just here, just pry it off a little bit, using the kickstart as an extra lever, just to jar it off. Just going to get in here, be careful not to damage the casing, and there we go. So we need to remove this hose just here for the airflow for the Variator itself, just so we can get full access into there. So that just pops off. Right, here's our transmission here. We can see the Variator in the front with the outer pulley there with the teeth on it, and your clutch and rear pulley just here. The first thing we need to do is remove this Variator nut here so we can actually get to the Variator itself and get the original one off. There's a couple ways of doing this. The first and easiest way is with a rattle gun. The second way, if you don't have a rattle gun, is with one of these tools here which we sell, has these teeth on it which actually bolts to the casing and locks off the outer fan pulley so you can remove it with a normal ratchet or spanner. So I'm going to show you how to do it with this tool today, just for the purpose of this video. Alright, so the way we do this without having to remove too many of the panels on the scooter, basically lift your air intake line up there, slide it up with the big nut end at the top. Just be really careful to bend or scratch these panels. So we're basically just trying to line this up with this clutch cover bolt and that clutch cover bolt there, with the teeth firmly sitting and blocking off this fan pulley. Alright, so now that I've got these bolts just loosely hand tied in there, I'm just going to tighten them up with this 8mm T-bar. Not ridiculously tight, just enough that they're firm. Right, now that we've got the lock installed there, clearly locking off this outer fan pulley, we can remove it just using a 15mm wrench or ratchet. Alright, so we'll just remove that there. Okay, now you can just carefully remove the fan pulley here. I've got full access to the belt in the Variator, so just move the belt out of the way. So just with your Variator, the best way to do it is to pull it from the spacer in the middle there and try and get your hand around to grab the ramp plate in the back, which you'll see why I'm saying that in a moment. As I pull the whole thing out, you're going to try and keep your hand on that ramp plate, because if you don't, when you remove it, all the rollers will fall out and fly everywhere, which will be a bit frustrating. Alright, so we've got full access. That's the crankshaft there. There's your spacer washer. It's the factory one, and there's your oil pump belt and water pump belt on the water-cooled model there. Right, now we can start installing our Malossi Variator. Alright, I've got our Malossi Variator out of its packet. I'm going to talk you through some of the parts that we've got here. We've got our 6 rollers. We've got what's called the basket with the spacer on the inside. We've got the ramp plate at the back. Got our ramp plate guides here, what is called guides. This kit also comes with 2 washers, so pretty much every Malossi Variator kit for a 50cc comes with this plastic washer. Throw that straight in the bin. That is a restriction washer. Do not install it. A few kits, mainly the Piaggio and the Yamaha, come with this metal washer. Now, it's important you do not throw the metal washer in the bin. The metal washer is necessary for installation. Right, we're going to assemble our variator. So what we're going to do is going to take our 6 guides here, insert them into the basket. Okay, now that they're all in there, just going to take our ramp plate. You just need to get your guides here and insert them onto the ramp. So just slide on like so. As you see, they're all inserted there. So now all we can do, we can slide that and place that onto it. So now we have our completed basket. So this is now ready to install on the scooter. Right, so here we are, we've got our completed basket. Now I'll just note something. This is the washer that ordinarily was behind our standard variator. So it's important you do remove this and you replace it with the black Malossi washer that we mentioned earlier. So we're going to put that on first. Okay, I'll slide that right to the back. Now, the important thing with putting your variator basket on is that you keep it closed so your rollers don't fly around everywhere once you put it on. So what we're going to do is, no, the main thing is you need to line the teeth on the ramp plate up with the teeth on the crank. So just gently place it on. Okay, push it from the basket, not the spacer. Carry the spacer along with it. If you just push the spacer, it'll push the ramp plate out and all your rollers are going to fall out. So I'll push that right to the back. It's definitely on there. Got a bit of spline here left for the outer pulley to grab onto, so we know that we've assembled that correctly, which is important. Now what we're going to do, pull the slack on this belt up. Now here's what can happen sometimes is that the belt doesn't want to go over the spacer washer because it needs to go over that washer. So all we do, pop the belt out a little bit. We just need to pull a bit of slack here. You're going to squeeze this to compress the spring on the inside of this so that we can pull the belt into this pulley a bit, so we have the extra slack to be able to get it onto the variator. Alright, so now that we've done that, we've got that extra bit of slack there to be able to get the belt onto the variator. Just going to install. So I've been very careful to leave this exactly how it was and not pull the parts apart, so I know that I get the washers and everything back in the correct order. So same deal. The outside of this has a spline on it, so sometimes if you need to, remove those carefully. Alright, so make sure that our belt has a bit of slack there and it's not getting caught on the belt, which it just had actually gotten caught. So you have that bit of spline left there, so that, put our fan back on, so that the spline on this outer grabber here for the fan actually has some spline on the crank to grab onto. So it's also important to make sure that you slide this back into its correct position. It's usually fairly obvious if it's not, but it's good to check. So make sure that we're clear there. Okay. Alright. I'm just going to do our nut up while we're holding it. Make sure that everything is assembled correctly. Let's get it hand tight so nothing can move around. Alright, there we go. Now we've still got our tool here locking that off, so we're able to just immediately do up the nut. Now without a torque wrench you can't really get this absolutely perfect, but the key is firm, tight, but do not over tighten it and stretch the thread on the crank. So that's fairly tight. It's 33 Newton meters if you do have a torque wrench, but if not, so I'd have to put excessive force on that to get that any tighter. So we're pretty happy with that. Alright, we're going to install our Malossi contra spring. A stiffer spring will have more force pushing the torque driver to be closed. Now when the torque driver is closed, it forces the belt up to the top of its motion, which in turn forces the belt to move down on the variator, which forces the rollers back into their natural position and actually gears the bike down. This is mainly for when you stop at the lights, you're going around a corner and you back off. You want the spring to force the gearing back so that when you hit the throttle, you're not taking off in effectively a high gear and it's bogs right down. You want it to rev back up again, you've got power straight away. Right, so I've got our magic tool here again, which I've removed from the variator. You'll see on the other side it has these two prongs. Now the reason for these is they allow you to stick into the holes on the clutch bell with a little cutout access hole there, so that you can then grab your 15mm socket again, same one you use for the variator, and undo that nut without a rudder gun. Now I've got a rattle gun here and I'm pretty lazy, so I'm going to use that to undo this. I've undone that nut with my rattle gun, so I'm just going to pull the clutch bell off. It should come off quite easily. You'll see on the inside here is our clutch. Now our spring is on the inside there. You'll just see it because the standard one is black, between the clutch and the torque driver here. Now the torque driver comes through. This is the thread on the inside of a torque driver, and this nut here is holding the clutch on top of the spring, which is being compressed. So if we go back to our magic tool again, which is just here, magic tool will allow you to get this off. Now it's going to be pretty hard for you to get it off on the scooter. So the way we do this, I'm just going to slide it off like so. Pull it off the bell. Don't get your fingers jammed because that will really hurt. Alright, I make it look hard because I'm using one hand, but it is quite easy. So what we're going to do is going to put that down. The best way we've found to do this, lay a towel or a cloth on the ground so you don't scratch your bottom of your driver up. It'll also give you a bit of grip. And basically what we do is we place both feet over the top of that there to block it off and hold it, so that when it comes undone it doesn't spring up and hit you in the face, which will hurt. And then use our tool here to undo that nut. It's pretty tight, so you'll need to use a bit of force, but it should come off fairly easily. Use an old rag, just put it on the ground, give you a bit of extra grip on the ground without scratching the back of the torque driver. So basically, to explain to you what I was saying earlier, place two of your feet, or someone else's feet, over the top of the clutch like that. And I put a bit of force on it and undo the nut like that. Doesn't look particularly glamorous, but it'll get the job done, and it won't damage your torque driver like putting it in a vise or something similar like that will do. Do not put it in a vise. Alright, so I've loosened it off with a magic tool here. So it's a little bit loose, just undo it by hand. That way you've got the most control and the clutch isn't going to spring up and smash you in the chin. Alright, there we go. Alright, there's our spring there. Piaggio's also come with this little plastic guide here, which just allows it to actually guide along the bottom of the inside the clutch there a little bit better. So it's going to move that little black guide over to our Malossi spring, which I've got here. Alright, so I'm just going to slide that in. Now that this is a little bit tricky part, basically we're just going to do the exact reverse of what we just did. So the best thing to do, line your clutch up, the spline on the inside so that when you compress it, it'll just sit on nicely. Now this is a little bit fiddly, there's no fantastically glamorous way of doing this, but basically just going to compress it back and do your nut up. Right, so I've got a nut back on there, same deal as the Variator nut, tight, firm, but not ridiculous. You do not want to strip that thread. So what we're going to do now, we're going to slide that back onto the belt. You're going to squeeze this in here to squeeze that spring and get the belt back into the middle of the torque driver, so that bit of extra slack to slip it onto the shaft just there. Alright, so we've squeezed the belt in. Now we're just going to insert it onto that shaft just there. Slide it through like that. I'll just tidy up this belt here so it slides in. And there we go. Alright, now what we're going to do, just going to put our clutch bell back on. So it's just going to slide on. Again, you just got to line up that spline in the centre. Just give it a bit of a wiggle until it goes on. It'll be fairly obvious once it does. Okay, now we are ready to put our nut back on. Same deal as before, you can use our magic tool to lock that off and do it with the 15mm socket just there, but I'm lazy, so I'm going to use my rattle gun again. Alright, before we put our clutch cover back on, what we're going to try and do here is we just want the belt to take up a bit of tension on the Variator and everything to equalise back out here between the rollers and the spring. So, spin your Variator a bit here, spin your torque drive, we're just trying to get that belt to tighten up just a little bit. There we go, and that's at a relatively acceptable level. Turning the Variator and the belt is turning as well. The main reason for this is just that when you start it up, there's not this huge amount of slack and no pressure holding those rollers in there, because they are spinning quite fast even just at idle. Alright, I'm not going to show you putting the clutch cover back on because it's quite boring. The main part just to be concerned about and watch for is just that this little starter pinion here, it is loosely sitting in there. So make sure it's back in there all the way, because it does have a small little slot in the clutch cover that it needs to sit into. Put your clutch cover back on, it'll just slide back on exactly the same way it came back off. We're just going to reassemble all our bolts. Next we're going to do is we're going to test ride it. So these Malossi Variators are specifically set up for each bike, so there shouldn't be too much tuning involved. If you've got a really highly tuned scooter and you're very fussy, you might want to muck around with the rollers a little bit, just the weights. You can get different weights. Obviously a lighter roller is going to want to up gear itself slower compared to a heavier roller, but it's all a balance. The great thing with the Variators is they come in so many different roller weights. There's so much mucking around and variation to do. You can really dial it right in. As a kit, most of these Variator kits are pretty good straight out of the box for most, sort of even basically to moderately, even to highly tuned 70 or 50cc scooters. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it makes it really simple and easy for you. The tool, the Variator and all the parts can be purchased on our website.